people. Home Truths, Saturday mornings at 9 on BBC Radio 4.
Uncovering the secrets of the centuries-old wreck of one of Oliver Cromwell's ships. Journeys to the bottom of the sea on BBC Two now. This is BBC One. Now the BBC News with Michael Burke. It's 9 o'clock.
12 million people's lives are at risk in a new Ethiopian famine. The UN's appealing for help as the Horn of Africa dries up. Verdict on Microsoft. The courts could order it to be broken up. And the Premiership's planning the biggest shake-up of football on television for a decade. Good evening. Famines return to the Horn of Africa. The UN's appealed for help to the outside world and says as many as 12 million people's lives may be at risk. Thousands are already on the move, abandoning their homes in an increasingly desperate search for water. The spring rains have failed again, and the Horn of Africa is scorched dry. In Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti and northern Kenya, years of low rainfall are now wiping out crops and livestock. Years of war have made the crisis worse. There are now grave food shortages across the region. In southeast Ethiopia, the vulnerable, the elderly and the very young are already dying. From Denan, the BBC's Raghi Omar reports. The pictures may upset you.
This should be the season of rain in eastern Ethiopia. But instead, on the road to Denan, we found nothing but emptiness in this parched land. Drought has gripped this region now for 4 years. Tens of thousands have migrated from their villages in search of water. They've come to makeshift camps like this on the edge of Denan, which is now home to 24,000 people. So many have been sapped of all their strength, but it is the young children who are the most vulnerable. Preliminary nutritional information gathered by local officials is bleak. A quarter of the children under 5 in Denan weigh half their normal body weight. Severe malnutrition has weakened them so much that few of them can withstand the outbreaks of diseases like measles and tuberculosis. The elders of the village say at least 6 children under 5 are dying every day. Bashara is 5 months old. But there are no facilities for children like her in Denan. No feeding centres, no doctors or nurses, not even a box of medicines. Local officials say they just don't have the resources to cope.
I don't think the drugs we have now is available to address the need of the people. We are trying to do something, but it's something beyond our capacity. So that international help is necessary at this time. Quick international help. They need food, they need shelter, they need drugs, they need water, or something we cannot manage ourselves alone.
Everywhere in Denan, you see hunger and deprivation. Mothers in particular face a cruel plight. They have to face the agony of watching their children slowly starve whilst they can do nothing to provide for them. We had been in the village for only an hour when we saw relatives gathered around a hut. Malnutrition had just claimed another child's life. Her name was Irshi, and she was just 2 years old. Having lost his whole herd of cattle, Abdi Sigid trekked with his family for 1 week to reach Denan, only to find further suffering. He lost 2 of his children on the journey. He says that all the nomads in this region face the same catastrophe. The roads around the village are littered with the carcasses of dead animals. There's hardly anything left of the herds on which so many people depend. The nearest well, which still has some water, is 8 miles away, but this precious resource is now being brought to Denan by truck. This crisis is now at the emergency stage, and plentiful supplies of water could be the only thing to prevent a major disaster. But there's still not enough water for so many people. And all the time, lives are being lost. Within the last 24 hours, this desolate graveyard has swelled, with 21 people having been buried here. Without water, food and medicines, there's hardly anything which is going to stop this trend. So much time has already been lost. Da Nang is a snapshot of the situation emerging across the Horn of Africa. Countries like Ethiopia are doing their best to cope, but the international community will have to come to this region's aid if the worst is to be avoided. Raghi Omar, BBC News, Da Nang, Ethiopia.
A court decision which could decide the fate of the computer giant Microsoft is expected in the next hour. A judge in America will rule on whether the company abused its position as the world's biggest provider of personal computer software. If he rules that Microsoft did break anti-competition laws, the company could be forcibly split up. Tonight, Microsoft's shares dropped sharply.
90% of the world's computer users see this symbol when they switch on. The Windows operating system has given Microsoft huge wealth and power, but tonight a judge in Washington appears certain to rule that the company has abused that power to stifle competition. Over the weekend, peace talks between Bill Gates' company and the US government collapsed. Microsoft officials claim the government's actions could harm the whole industry.
One of the fundamental issues about this court case is around the right to innovate. So I suggest if we actually were to lose the court case, the right to innovate is not only our right to innovate, it's all those other thousands of people who work in this industry. So if we can't innovate, nobody else can innovate.
But it's the way Microsoft has used Windows as a battering ram against rivals, which has been at the centre of this trial. When a browser, the software used to surf the internet, was integrated into Windows, computer users soon started ditching Netscape, which had dominated this market. Microsoft's lawyers are expecting a damning ruling tonight, with the judge finding that their company has broken competition laws. The debate then moves on to possible penalties. The judge might break up the company, ordering Microsoft to split into 3 separate businesses. He could order it to open its source code, giving competitors access to the secrets behind Windows. He could insist on fair pricing, or he could create a series of mini Microsofts, identical but rival versions of the same company. Shares in the world's most valuable business fell sharply as the verdict was awaited. But the impact of any breakup of Microsoft on the rest of the economy may now make the American government cautious.
The American government is concerned that if Microsoft is dismembered, there might be a domino effect on the American economy. Because Microsoft, after all, is the most visible software company in the world, and certainly it is the most successful software company in the world.
In an election year, Microsoft is encouraging computer users to lobby in its favour, and it's promising to take the case to lengthy appeals. While this marathon battle has been going on, the computer industry has changed beyond all recognition, and when it's finally concluded, new arrivals may have appeared on the scene to give Microsoft just the kind of competition the US government wants to promote. Rory Catherine-Jones, BBC News.
And there'll be details of that Microsoft ruling, plus reaction from Britain and the United States on BBC News 24 at 10 o'clock. Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe has told Britain to stop meddling in his country's affairs, but he has promised that the election will go ahead there in May. Britain's been increasingly critical of the economic and political chaos in Zimbabwe, which led to violence in Harare at the weekend. Today, the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook met Mr Mugabe at a Europe-Africa summit in Cairo.
Robin Cook and Robert Mugabe, a strained appearance for the cameras at the Africa-Europe summit. Their countries used to be firm friends, but in recent weeks the relationship between Britain and Zimbabwe has been turning sour. As opposition to President Mugabe's rule has grown, Britain and other European countries have been alarmed by the way he's reacted to it, at times with intimidation and violence. President Mugabe is smarting from the criticism.
When we have difficulties, you see, Britain has no right at all to try and suggest to the rest of the world that we are a failure, nor have they a right to try and suggest to us what we should do.
Sitting close to each other at the summit, Mr Cook and Mr Mugabe later made time to discuss their differences.
All our concerns were expressed, and I expressed the areas that we had worries about. I'm pleased that President Mugabe did give me an assurance that there would be elections in Zimbabwe next month in May. What I want is for the people of Zimbabwe to have the chance to choose their government themselves and to have a free and a fair chance to do so, and I'm pleased to have that confirmation.
Another much criticised African figure, Colonel Gaddafi of Libya, appeared to have entered the cooperative spirit of the conference. Then, in closed session, he announced that Africa needed water pumps, not democracy. It was exactly the language European leaders didn't want to hear. The spat between Britain and Zimbabwe highlights the tensions between some African countries and their former colonial powers. Britain insists it was never the aim to lecture Zimbabwe, only to offer assistance. It's clear, however, that if Europe is to help with Africa's many problems, there'll be growing pressure on African leaders to promote democracy and the rule of law. Colin Blaine, BBC News, Cairo.
Here, refugee groups have criticised the government's latest plans to deal with growing numbers of asylum seekers. They're to be moved to sites around the country to relieve pressure on the southeast of England. And from now on, they'll be given food and clothing vouchers instead of cash.
Children from Kosovo, Afghanistan, Romania and Poland. This is the changing face of the UK.
Does Jane like running?
Thousands of asylum seekers are being forcibly moved across the country. Today, the government is phasing in its responsibility for dispersal, till now run by local authorities. 30 asylum seekers have been sent to this hostel in Essex. Rup Singh is cut off from the Afghan community in London, but grateful for shelter.
We were exhausted. 21 days they took us to get here. Now we appreciate. We got a lot of privilege here.
But is this rural location the right one for an international community? Councils say the government should pay them an extra £30 million to find more suitable housing in multicultural areas. Some locals here in Langford resent their new neighbours.
Here there are no suitable facilities. There is no school, there is no medical centre, there isn't even a shop. And although we would welcome them if it was a suitable place.
Another key part of the Asylum Act sees all new arrivals given vouchers rather than money. A couple will be paid £57.37 each week. A child under 16, £26.60. Within the total, they'll get just £10 in cash. Oxfam is refusing to accept the vouchers, saying they'll bring added poverty and stigma. Overall, the government says the new policies will help stem the number of new arrivals. But critics question whether the government can really carry them out and whether they're fair. Geeta Gurumurthy, BBC News.
Tests have shown that mobile phones fitted with hand-free sets may not limit the amount of radiation to the head and could even increase it. Tests carried out for the Consumers Association found that 3 times as much radiation may be carried to the head by some sets compared to traditional models. But Carphone Warehouse, the manufacturers of one of the 2 models tested, said its own research contradicted the findings. The Director General of the BBC, Greg Dyke, has ordered a massive shake-up in how the corporation is to be run. Hundreds of jobs could go in a drive to cut management costs, and much of the internal market introduced by his predecessor, John Birt, will be dismantled. Mr. Dyke said the money saved would go into programmes.
See you guys.
Greg Dyke arriving at Television Centre this morning. The BBC, he believes, has too many managers, too little leadership. Today, he spelt out what he means to do about it. Out goes the old 11-strong board, many of them with their own support staffs. In come 17 divisional directors, including many more programme makers. Out go the 190 business units trading in an internal market, to be replaced by just 50.
We have to cut management layers and duplication across the BBC.
In a speech to staff, Greg Dyke said the organisation needed to become more agile and less bureaucratic. Hundreds of middle managers could lose their jobs.
OK, nice and quiet, please. Stand by. Action.
In Birmingham, they're making a new daytime serial, Doctors. Greg Dyke's aim to spend more money on programmes for viewers and listeners by taking an axe to the BBC's costly bureaucracy.
At the moment, we spend 76% of our money on programmes and services and 24% on running the institution of the BBC. I want to reduce that by something like 10%. That way, we get another £200 million a year to spend on programmes.
John Burt, Greg Dyke's predecessor, who left in January, set up an internal market under which BBC channels bought programmes from a giant in-house production department. Now, many of Lord Burt's reforms are being dismantled.
The BBC is about to swap one management philosophy for another, very different one. John Burt's reforms were designed to keep costs down and ensure the BBC knew where every penny went. Greg Dyke puts the emphasis on leadership and says he wants his managers to be free to manage. Nick Hyam, BBC News at Television Centre.
Sally Slater, the 6-year-old girl who received a donor heart at the weekend, is still very ill in hospital, but her parents are cautiously optimistic that she'll recover. Doctors in Newcastle explained today how they used a pioneering plastic heart to keep Sally alive while waiting for a donor to be found. The Prime Minister's wife, Sherry Booth, has launched sweeping changes to the legal aid system in England and Wales. From now on, people injured in accidents won't be able to get legal aid to sue for compensation. Instead, they'll have to find a solicitor prepared to work on a no-win, no-fee basis. The entry fee for national museums and galleries in England could be cut to just £1 from next year. The government wants more people to visit them. The final decision will lie with individual institutions. NATO says the net is closing around suspected war criminals still at large after its troops arrested Momcilo Krajisnik, a Bosnian Serb official charged with genocide and crimes against humanity. He's the highest-ranking suspect to be arrested by UN forces looking for those responsible for war crimes in Bosnia. After his arrest in Pale, he was taken to The Hague to be tried by the War Crimes Tribunal.
NATO troops used explosives to blast open the door of Momcilo Krajisnik's home. They were taking no chances. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when Mr. Krajisnik was dragged from his bed and led away barefoot and still in his pyjamas. He wasn't even allowed to get dressed. His two sons said they had their hands tied up with plastic restrainers. And Mr. Krajisnik's father ridiculed the NATO operation. If the troops had only knocked on the door, he said, I'd have opened it. French soldiers led the arrest operation, but it's thought British special forces may also have played a part. Momcilo Krajisnik is the highest-ranking suspect to be seized for war crimes in Bosnia. As a leader of the Serbs there, he often met senior Western politicians like the British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook. 3 years ago, he seemed happy to do business with Mr. Krajisnik, even to shake his hand. Now, though, Momcilo Krajisnik stands accused of helping to mastermind mass slaughter in Bosnia. He is charged with genocide and crimes against humanity.
Mr. Krajisnik is a big fish in the Bosnian Serb pond and in the affairs of what went on during the 90s in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So his arrest, I think, is a very big signal to all of those who have got a guilty conscience in the area that they can run, but they can't hide.
People like the Bosnian Serb military and political leaders Ratko Mladic and Radovan Karadzic, both are war crime suspects who must be a little more anxious tonight as they hear that their old friend Momcilo Krajisnik has now arrived at The Hague to answer for what he did in Bosnia. The net of the War Crimes Tribunal may finally be closing in. Ben Brown, BBC News.
Here, nominations for the Mayor of London closed today. There's now just over a month to go before polling day. One of the biggest challenges for whoever wins is how to improve the capital's underground system. London's tube needs billions of pounds of investment. The big argument is over government plans to bring in private companies to improve tracks, tunnels, signals and stations.
The underground system at London Victoria is so crowded in the morning they have to keep people waiting outside. 300,000 commuters a day flood through here onto a system that's old and too often unreliable. There's never been and never will be enough taxpayers' money to modernise the tube. It's a problem that's got to be sorted out once and for all.
The tube needs billions and the government just can't afford it. So the question is not about whether the private sector should get involved, but how. Should city money be raised through bonds, leaving the public sector to run the system? Or would it be better if private companies got fully involved in the modernisation?
The government wants to hand over the job of upgrading the tracks, signals and stations to private firms. They'd borrow the money from the city. Responsibility for operating the system and for safety would stay with London Underground. They'd pay the private firms back according to how much the service improves. This idea is supported by Labour's official candidate Frank Dobson, and the government's advisers say it's the best value for money.
Well, basically, the public sector can concentrate what it's good at, which is running the train services and deciding the levels of services that it wants the private sector to deliver. The private sector does what it's good at, which is delivering those services efficiently and cheaply.
But a study by London Transport 2 years ago concluded that a public-private partnership wasn't the best deal. In fact, it was one of the worst.
It's basically due to its complexity. You've got all these interfaces between track and infrastructure operations, the different companies. It's very, very complicated. It's a field day for lawyers and accountants, but not a very good thing for the passengers, I don't think.
On New York's subway, improvements have been paid for through bonds, a system London Transport study said was one of the best options. A similar plan, with services publicly run, is supported by the Liberal Democrat candidate Susan Kramer and the independent Ken Livingstone. The Conservative Stephen Norris also wants New York-style bonds with private companies running the service. Tube experts say the debate between the government's public-private partnership, or PPP, and bonds is not only about best value, but about power.
I think it's really all about control and who decides. The PPP solution is the government deciding what's going to happen for 30 years. The bonding solution would be the mayor deciding, and that's the real issue.
The candidates are trying to influence the government now because they know ministers will make final decisions about the long-term funding of the tube before the new mayor takes control. Simon Montague, BBC News on London Underground.
Prince Charles has warned the new Food Standards Agency that too much regulation could lead to smaller producers being forced out of business. The new agency started work today by outlining a raft of new controls. It wants cases of salmonella halved within 5 years. Butchers face tough new meat hygiene